My name is Emily, and 3 years ago, I thought I'd found the rest of my life in Jason. He was the kind of guy whose smile could make strangers forgive him for being late. Charming, tattooed at the wrist, a little reckless, and impossibly gentle when he looked at me. We met at a rooftop party in August, the city humming below us, and the kind of chemistry you read about in novels lit up in seconds. There were late night drives with the windows down, whispered plans about a life together, a ring that arrived after a year, and a house filled with framed photos of vacations and lazy Sunday mornings. Romantic tension lived in the small, beautiful things. The way he'd brush hair behind my ear while pretending not to notice. The sudden quiet when he'd trace his thumb over my knuckle, or the text that read, "I miss you," even when we were in the same room. That heat made everything feel inevitable. I trusted him with the silly and the sacred, with bills and with my mother's handwritten recipes. I thought we were unbreakable. One October evening, a subtle fracture appeared. I was at work when I noticed a lock on my phone I didn't recognize, a shared cloud album. Jason had started without telling me. When I swiped through it, my stomach dropped. Pictures of him kissing a woman I'd never met, laughing in a bar while my name sat unread in his messages. The kind of betrayal you only see in movies, the kind you tell yourself must have a mistake behind it. I called him. He laughed, then stuttered. He said it was a misunderstanding, that she was a coworker, that we'd been through this before and come out stronger. But the photographs were indisputable. I didn't explode. I didn't throw things. Instead, I chose a weapon people rarely expect: silence and clarity. The hook of what happens next is simple but devastating. Revenge for me wasn't about cruelty. It was about reclaiming the life he'd taken for granted and forcing truth to be the architect of his collapse. I started small. I collected receipts and dates, traced patterns, and created a map of secrets. Every little lie had its breadcrumb. I stopped texting him sweet nothings and began rearranging our life around honesty. I told my closest friends not to shame him publicly, but so I wouldn't be accused of inventing stories. I scheduled appointments for him and me: therapy, marriage counseling, anything that might force a confession. When his stories bent and snapped under gentle pressure, I watched the man who once kissed the back of my hand grow smaller. But the real tension, the part people lean in for, came from the way I rebuilt my life in plain sight. I started taking improv classes and painting again, things Jason had dismissed as hobbies when they took time away from his weekend plans. I asked for a promotion at work, then took a business trip and returned with confidence that didn't ask for his validation. I redecorated the house with colors he always said were too loud. Each new choice widened the space between us and made his excuses less effective. He tried to match my changes with apologies, and the cycle replayed: charm, promise, betrayal. But the more I leaned into myself, the more his excuses crumbled. When I finally confronted him, not in a bar, not in front of friends, but at midnight in the kitchen where we'd shared midnight coffee for years, it was quiet. No slammed doors, no shouting. Just the list, the photos, the dates, the lies. I told him I had been faithful. I told him I had loved him the way people bring water to flowers, daily and without thought for reward. He, in turn, offered the smallest, most human thing: apology that sounded rehearsed, then hollow. He begged for a second chance, for a future I no longer wanted to build with someone who had treated me like an option. He betrayed me, so I made him watch everything fall apart, people say, picturing malicious plans and cinematic burnings. That's not what happened. What I did was simpler and, I think, harsher. I walked away. I filed for separation, sold our shared car, and moved the photos that tied me to him into a box I labeled past. The not-so-glamorous truth is that people who cheat rarely collapse because of revenge. They collapse slowly because the life they counted on begins to echo without reciprocity. His friends took sides. His parents called. The jokes he used to tell at work became uncomfortable when colleagues noticed his distracted texts and increasingly erratic behavior. Opportunities that once seemed secure slipped away. A client left, then another. Where I had been steady and present, his absence of accountability created ripples that touched things he cared about. What kept me awake, though, wasn't the imagined sweetness of watching his world burn. It was the way his face changed when he realized the life he'd been co-authoring was no longer his to edit. I watched him go from a man who could command a room to someone who couldn't explain to himself how he'd become unmoored. That, to me, was the most precise justice. Not an act of cruelty, but the consequence of choices. In the months that followed, I dated slightly, awkwardly, and then not at all for a while. I learned to sleep alone and to make breakfast for one without feeling the weight of a missing plate. My friends rallied around weekend hikes and texts that said simply, "You good?" I was. I started painting again, canvases stacked like quiet victories. I accepted that love isn't always a rescue. Sometimes it's the courage to save yourself. And Jason? He called a handful of times, each conversation thinner than the last. The last message he sent was a photo of the coffee shop where we'd first met, captioned, "Remember when?" I didn't reply. I unfolded my life with deliberate care and filled the empty spaces with things that mattered to me. Laughter that was unedited for someone else's approval, plans that matched my heartbeat, a trust rebuilt with myself. If there's a moral here, it's not revenge. It's this. When someone betrays you, the truest power isn't in making them suffer. It's in making a life they can't touch. Let them watch as you grow quieter and stronger, as the parts of your world they took for granted refuse to fall with them. You don't need to orchestrate their ruin. You simply need to become the person you were before the betrayal, only more whole. So when people ask if I got closure, I tell them the truth. Closure isn't dramatic. It's ordinary. It is the small intake of breath the morning you realize you no longer need someone to define your worth. And watching him watch that realization settle on my face was, in its own imperfect way, everything I ever wanted.